There are few things that we love more than the drama of a trial. Think about the great TV shows that you will have watched as you saw the truth being uncovered and justice being done. You might think of great movies where you see the truth being revealed. You may even think, to misquote A Few Good Men, that we may want the truth, but actually, can we handle the truth? For as we reflect on Matthew's account of the trial of Jesus before the Sanhedrin, we may wonder who's actually on trial here. But one thing will become clear, crystal clear. There are few good men. And in fact, there's only one. But is that a truth we can really handle? As we continue our way to the events of Jesus' crucifixion, Jesus has been handed over by Judas to a mob, and that mob now hand Jesus over to the high priests and the elders who sent them. We are told in the first verses here that they have gathered together, and now knowing what's happening here, it's hard not to hear an overtone of Psalm 2, where we're told the leaders of the nations gathered together against the Lord and his anointed. It's that kind of feeling that's going on here in this late Thursday night gathering. Already it's an ominous start to this trial, which becomes clearer as this is no fair trial. This has a predetermined end. They know the verdict they want. They've just got to work out how to get there. Now, this is not a surprise to us. We've been told since chapter 12 that the Pharisees have been conspiring to destroy Jesus. We're told at the beginning of chapter 26 that the chief priests and elders have been conspiring to arrest Jesus and kill him. There is a conspiracy here. Dark forces are at work, and there is only one possible outcome. They go looking for evidence to back up this predetermined verdict. Now, we as the readers could actually point them to some, because we've been encouraging people to read the Gospel of Matthew over the past 3 weeks, and I'm sure you're all up to date. Now, if you have been up to date in your readings of Matthew, this week you will have read Matthew chapter 14. And in Matthew chapter 14, Jesus says he is greater than the temple, he is greater than the wise man Solomon, and he is greater than Jonah who converted Nineveh. He is therefore greater than the heart of the Jewish faith, he is greater than the greatest king of the Jewish faith, and he is greater than the greatest prophet. They're looking for evidence that this guy's got to go. There it is. It's no surprise that they feel under threat. He's certainly saying, I've got more power and I'm more influential than any of you gathered on this dark Thursday night. All their traditions, all their institutions, all their hopes are on the line. These conniving, assembled conspirators just have to do away with him. He is a threat to everything they hold dear. So they will do whatever is necessary, break whatever laws they have to protect the power that they have. Now, some scholars have found it hard to believe that the Jewish leaders would act in this way, that they would so blatantly disregard their own laws and procedures. That just wouldn't happen. They wouldn't rush to judgment like this. I have to suggest to such scholars that they just don't read their own newspapers. This is how we see institutions behaving all the time when they are under threat. We should not place our faith in institutions. We have way too much evidence that this is exactly how institutions behave, even particularly religious institutions. And when their power is under threat, when that institution is threatened, they will do what they believe is necessary, believing that the ends justify the means, and will do what is unjust and illegal, and against the very tenets of the faith they are supposed to promote. They use their power for self-protection and so become abusive and unjust. I could not read this and not reflect how often in church history the church has taken these steps to protect its power and its privilege. It couldn't handle the truth, and its hypocrisy is clear, crystal clear. Religious institutions are on trial here, and they're found wanting. But the trial does move to the heart of the matter after some dubious evidence is presented where somebody says something like, we know what Jesus says from John chapter 12. The high priest uses every religious pressure he can bring to bear. I put you under oath before the living God. Tell us if you're the Messiah, the Son of God. It's worth perhaps remembering the last time Jesus was asked if he was the Son of God. Anyone remember? Okay, obviously it's a rhetorical question now. Back in chapter 4, if you are the Son of God, turn these stones into bread. It suggests that this question from the high priest comes from the darkest of sources. But the last time Messiah and Son of God were in the same sentence comes from Peter when he is asked, who do you say that I am? And Peter confesses who he believed Jesus was. You are the Messiah. You are the Son of God. So let's consider for a moment how Peter's going with his trial. Now, I have to say, as I read this section, this is the easiest section for me to imagine myself in the story. I suspect I'm not alone in seeing myself in that courtyard and wondering, how would I go? Would I have done any better? Well, Peter makes a good start. At least he has followed along. The rest have all gone, but he's following along, not exactly with Jesus as Lord, but following at a distance, although ominously we're told that he wants to see how this will end. He sits with the guards. Perhaps he's dreaming of what he would say if he was called in front of the high priest, what great statements of faith he would make to vindicate and free Jesus. When the challenge comes, it doesn't come in the court. It comes in the courtyard. And it doesn't come from an aggressive and aggrandized, proud high priest. It's a simple question from an inquisitive, humble servant girl. It is hard to imagine a greater difference in status between the chief priest in all his power in Jerusalem and an inquisitive teenager. Yet it is here, before this most unpresupposing of questioners, that Peter fails. It's not in the dramatic, it's in the mundane. Would we do any better? Have we done any better? When we have had a chance to say that we were with Jesus, even in the most innocent of questions, and innocuous of questions, have we done any better than Peter? Now, obviously, for Peter, the stakes are clearly higher. His life may depend on the answer he gives. But just earlier that day, that evening, he had said he'd rather die than deny Jesus. And we, for whom the stakes are so much lower, still so often deny him. For Peter, the question must have stung, though. He is accused, what of? Being with Jesus, the very thing he isn't. You were with Jesus, but he knows he's not. And his failure grows worse as he obfuscates. I don't know what you're talking about. Doesn't quite actually deny Jesus yet. At the moment, it's just, oh, it's all too hard. I don't know what you're talking about. Claims to have no knowledge of Jesus. But once that step is made, now everything gets deeper and darker. Peter is first accused by a solitary woman, then denounced by another woman to a group, and finally by an entire group who accuse him. Physically, he gets further from Jesus. First he's in the courtyard, then the porch, and finally retreating to outside. The denials get stronger. First a lack of knowledge, then an oath, then a curse. I do not know him. The more he talks, the stronger his accent has become, thus giving him away as a Galilean. But the more he speaks, the more he gives Jesus away. And in offering oaths and curses, he is breaking Jesus' teaching on the Sermon on the Mount. The more we deny Jesus, the more we flaunt his commands. Would we have done any better? Do we do any better? Do we start at a distance and then move further away than being with Jesus? But whilst Peter is outside denying everything, Jesus is inside denying nothing. As Jesus responds to the high priest's questions, he gives a qualified yes, so you say. But he's not going to use the terms that the high priest gives him of Messiah and Son of God, which can be so easily understood. He wants to reframe how people see him. And if his previous silence had been like that of the suffering servant from Isaiah 53, who before his shearers was silent, Jesus now wants to be understood not as the Messiah or Son of God, but as the glorious Son of Man, seated at God's right hand, as pictured in Psalm 110 and Daniel 7. He will thus be the true ruler of God's people, and through his suffering vindicate and save God's people. That's who he is. He says you will all see it. You all know it. Whilst Peter is outside being faithless, Jesus is acting in full faith that he is fulfilling God's will. With this declaration, he's effectively signed his own death warrant. This is too much for the high priest, and the verdict is quickly given. He deserves death, according to Leviticus 24. Rather than salute, he is spat on and slapped with a mocking prophecy of prophesy if you are the Messiah. The irony here is huge. Do you remember how this reading ends? Peter remembers that Jesus has said, before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. This whole passage is redolent with the fulfillment of Jesus' prophecies. Judas will betray me, he does. Peter will deny me, he does. The chief priests and the elders will crucify me, they do. Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, the Son of Man, seated at the right hand of the power, coming on the clouds of glory. That's who Jesus is, the one good man. What are we to do with this? Now, historically, I want to say we can be confident that this story comes straight from Peter. I want to say this for a few reasons. Firstly, it is honest. It's so brutally honest. Secondly, it's psychologically understandable. We can read this and go, yep, I can see that's what had happened. Thirdly, it's clearly Jewish. They can understand the different tones, the different accents that come from different parts of Judea. And finally, it is unthinkable that the Christian community would have made up such a story. This is Peter, the foundation of the church, the one who has the keys to the kingdom. Nobody would make up a story that makes him up to be such a loser. But Peter grew through this experience, even though it broke him. There is a story of the early church, we don't know whether it's true or not, but whenever Peter heard a cock crow, he would weep every time. And you can imagine it. Every time he would be reminded of his failure and his denial. But Peter needed to go through this, or he would have been, well, cocky. I told you there was another bad joke coming. But a sermon like this needs one moment of light relief. As one commentator put it, an unbroken Peter would have been an unbearable Peter. An unbroken Peter would have been an unbearable Peter. And just as Peter needed to learn his own weakness, we need to learn it too, or we may be unbearable. This narrative teaches what has been called the doctrine of our total undependability. The doctrine of our own undependability. Our institutions let Jesus down. We let Jesus down. We are undependable. This leads us to a truth that we may not be easily able to handle, but it should be clear as crystal. We are not ultimately put right with God by our faith in Jesus. Now, that should have brought a from the assembled congregation, and perhaps a blasphemy. Let me finish the sentence or the thought. We are not put right with God by our faith in Jesus, but by the faithfulness of Jesus. Our faith can be so wavering and fickle that the slightest challenge can derail it. But Jesus stays the course and is faithful for us. For in his faithfulness is our forgiveness. In his faithfulness is our forgiveness. It is in his faithfulness that we discover that Jesus' yes to Peter is greater than Peter's no to Jesus. Where our faith wavers, Jesus stays strong. We do not depend on our faith, but the one in whom we have faith in, and he is faithful. In his faithfulness, not ours, is our hope. And thanks be to God because of the doctrine of our total undependability. That is a truth that I pray we can all handle, and that it's been crystal clear. Amen.